So in 2026, China's big push for technological self-reliance is all over the news. But, ambitious goals on paper are one thing. What's actually happening on the ground can be something else entirely. Today, this is our special investigative report. We're digging into the data to explore the very real gap between the government's grand innovation blueprint and the tough realities researchers are facing.
All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the official vision, the grand blueprint. Then we're going to unpack two massive problems holding things back: a huge administrative overload and what's being called a campaign-style approach to policy. After that, we'll see what the consequences of all this are, and finally, we'll explore the possible solutions being put on the table.
Okay, first things first. To really get a handle on the challenges, we've got to start with the vision, right? The official ambition. And it's a powerful one, centered completely on driving innovation.
And this quote right here, it really sums up the core promise. The idea is to shift gears, moving away from imitation and really doubling down on original invention. The goal is to lead the way in groundbreaking research, create entirely new industries, and build up what they call strategic technological power. It's a very clear, very ambitious plan.
Okay, and this is really the heart of our investigation. When you have a goal that's this clear, everything comes down to execution. So, does the system they've built actually help make this vision a reality, or does it get in its own way? And that brings us to the first major problem.
The first structural problem our analysis uncovered is a system that's just, it's drowning in its own bureaucracy. The whole phenomenon is being called administrative overload. And I want to put a hard number on this for you, because it's pretty staggering. Data from just last year, 2025, is pretty wild. In China's universities and research institutes, more than 30% of all staff are administrative. Just let that sink in. Almost 1 out of every 3 people is working in an office, in a support role, not actually doing the research.
So you can see how this top-heavy structure isn't just, a little inefficient. It puts this immense, crushing burden right on the shoulders of the innovators themselves. The result is a system that almost seems designed to prioritize paperwork over progress.
And this chart, wow, it lays out that day-to-day disconnect perfectly. On one side, you have the ideal, right? Focusing on research, long-term exploration, trying things and failing and trying again. And then there's the reality. In 2026, researchers are spending their days filling out forms, sitting in endless meetings, and chasing short-term KPIs. It's an environment that can absolutely choke the creativity it's supposed to be supporting.
Okay, so that leads us right into the second big systemic problem, and this one really just makes the first one worse. This tendency to roll out policy like it's a massive, top-down political campaign.
So what do we even mean by campaign-style execution? Well, think of it like this. It's a massive push to get quick, flashy results. It means mobilizing huge amounts of money and people at incredible speed. But the problem is, this approach often values what looks good on paper right now over the slow, patient, and often frustrating work that true scientific breakthroughs actually require.
What this creates is a kind of gold rush effect. When the government declares a certain field a priority, like AI or biomedicine, all the money, all the talent just floods in that direction. And that means other, maybe less flashy, but absolutely critical areas of basic research, they get left behind, totally starved for resources. It creates a really unbalanced system.
And if you want the single most concrete piece of evidence for this, here it is, the phenomenon of repeated construction. Because everyone is chasing the same top-down goals, you see different cities and provinces all building nearly identical laboratories for the same hot field. You end up with a ton of redundant investment and incredibly low efficiency. It becomes a race to build facilities, not a race to make new discoveries.
So you take that administrative overload, you add this campaign-style spending, and what do you get? Well, the entire innovation pipeline gets jammed up. And it's especially bad at what they call the last mile, turning a good idea into a real product. What we're talking about here is the lab-to-market problem. You have these brilliant ideas bubbling up in universities, but they just die on the vine. There's this huge gap between an academic discovery and actually applying it in the real world.
A major report out of Beijing in 2025 actually put a spotlight right on this. It identified a huge structural break in the chain. Universities are producing research and companies are hungry for innovation, but that critical step in the middle, the pilot testing, the early stage funding you need to prove an idea can actually work, that whole piece is just missing. It's systemically broken. And here's the crazy part. The data is so clear on this. When an idea does get that pilot testing, its chance of making it to market can shoot up to 80%. But because of these systemic blockages, the vast majority of great ideas never even get that chance.
Okay, so after all that, after seeing these huge, deep-rooted problems, what's the path forward? What's the solution? It seems the answer isn't just another campaign, but a deep, fundamental reform of the whole system.
Well, the analysis points to 3 key reforms that really try to tackle these problems at the source. First, cut the red tape. Free up researchers' time and energy. Second, and this is huge, build a culture that's more tolerant of failure. Real innovation means taking risks, and you have to be allowed to fail. And third, completely overhaul the way success is measured, rewarding long-term, meaningful impact instead of just ticking boxes on short-term metrics.
And that really leaves us with a big, lingering question, doesn't it? For a system this deeply entrenched, are these kinds of structural reforms enough to fix such deep structural problems? Can they really break the cycle and finally unlock all of that incredible innovative potential? For 2026 and beyond, that is the billion-dollar question.